company. And the other great thing about that is during our busy Q4 holiday season, which is coming up, people from all different departments hop on the phones, and then we don't need to worry about hiring temps that may not deliver the same service level, or they may not be great for our culture. The other thing we do is everyone that's hired during that new hire class, at the end of the first week, we make an offer of, it says $2,000 here, it's actually now up to $4,000 to quit and leave the company right then and there. And that's a standing offer until the end of the training, and then we extend it a few weeks after that. And starting pay in Las Vegas for a call center rep is $11 an hour, plenty of other call centers. So it's a pretty significant amount of money, and the reason we do that is because we don't want employees there for a paycheck. We want employees that really believe in the long-term vision of the company and really feel like this is the right culture for them. There's also something we put out once a year called a culture book, which I'll make freely available to anyone that's interested. But basically, every year, I ask employees to write a few paragraphs about what the Zappos culture means to them, and except for typos, it's unedited, so it includes the good and the bad. So kind of like how on Amazon you might see customer reviews of products, these are essentially employee reviews of the company. We're also very active on Twitter. If you go to twitter.zappos.com, you can kind of get a feeling for what the culture of our company is like, because we have a page where we aggregate all of the tweets together. So in terms of our brand, for at least over the next several years, we have something we internally refer to as the 3 Cs: clothing, customer service, and company culture. And this is kind of the life cycle of the customer. So customers that have never heard of Zappos before, have no idea what we do, want them to know we've got a great selection of clothing, footwear, and other product categories. Once they know about that, then we want them to know we're all about delivering the very best customer service. And that's not something we tell them so much as something they experience when they see how fast our shipping is, or how easy the free shipping both ways is, or call our call center and talk to someone that truly wants to deliver a great service. And once they know about that, then we want them to know about our company culture, because that's really the platform that makes everything possible. And that's part of the reason why we actually open up our doors and offer tours to the public. So we've actually had customers email us and tell us when they get that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, that Zappos is happiness in a box. So whether it's the happiness that customers feel from getting that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, or the happiness that customers feel from experiencing great customer service, or the happiness that employees feel from being part of a culture where the values of the company, the corporate values, match their own personal values, the thing that we realize ties all of these 3 things together is Zappos is really just about delivering happiness, whether it's to customers or employees, or we apply that same philosophy to our vendor partners as well. So when you come for a tour, the first thing you'll see is the Zappos library. There's about 30, 40 titles in the reception area, but it's actually a giving library. One of our core values is to pursue growth and learning, and we give all these books out freely, not only to our employees, but to visitors as well. Some of the titles rotate in and out, but 2 of the titles, if you guys have not read these books, I would strongly, strongly recommend are Good to Great and Tribal Leadership. And I actually wish these books existed prior to Zappos being founded, because it would have saved us a lot of trial and error. And in fact, we even teach classes on these books to our own employees. And the reason why I think these books are really interesting and important is because the authors researched and looked at what separated the great companies in terms of long-term financial performance from just the good ones or mediocre ones. And they were actually kind of surprised by their findings. They found that the great companies had 2 important ingredients that the good ones or mediocre ones generally did not. The first ingredient was that they found the great companies all had strong cultures. And for us, we formalized the definition of our culture into 10 core values. But we actually didn't always have core values at Zappos. It wasn't until 5 or 6 years into the company that we rolled out our core values. And it was actually one of those things that a lot of us, myself included, kind of resisted in the early days, because it felt like one of those big corporate things to do. And part of the reason we felt that way, or at least why I felt that way, is because a lot of, especially bigger corporations, have these things called core values or guiding principles or so on, but the problem is usually they're very lofty sounding. They kind of read like a press release that the marketing department put out. They sound exactly the same as their competitors, and maybe you can read about it on the website, learn about it on day 1 of orientation, but then it just becomes this meaningless plaque on the lobby wall. Well, we wanted to come up with committable core values. And by committable, meaning we're actually willing to hire or fire people based on whether they're living up to those values, completely independent of their actual job performance. And when you use that criteria, it's actually a really hard list to come up with. It took us a year to come up with it, and it was, we involved the whole company. It wasn't just a few senior executives at an offsite somewhere. And so here's actually the 10 Zappos core values. And what I discovered accidentally a couple years later after we came out with these core values that I thought was really cool is if you do a Google search for any of these values by themselves and just choose one of them, in almost all cases, Zappos is the #1 search result. Whereas for most companies, pick a random company, pick a random value, do a Google search for it, and page after page after page, that company's name is nowhere to be found. So we actually have interview questions for each and every one of these values. The one that probably trips us up the most during the hiring process is the last one, be humble, because there's a lot of smart, talented people out there that are also egotistical. And for us, it's not even a question. We just won't hire them. But the conversation at a lot of other companies might be, well, this person might be kind of annoying and rub you the wrong way, but he's going to add a lot of value, and therefore we should hire this person. And that one hire may or may not bring the company culture downhill, but I think if you keep making compromises like that over and over and over again, that's why most large corporations don't have great company cultures. It's also probably the one that's hardest to actually ask an interview question for, because you can't just ask a candidate, how humble are you? And they say, I'm the most humble person in the whole wide world, hire me. So one of the ways we test this is actually, a lot of our candidates are from out of town. We'll pick them up from the airport in a Zappos shuttle, give them a tour, and then they'll spend the rest of the day interviewing. Well, at the end of the day of interviews, the recruiter will circle back to the shuttle driver and ask how he or she was treated. And it doesn't matter how well the day of interviews went. If the shuttle driver wasn't treated well, then we won't hire that person. One of my favorite interview questions is actually for core value #4, be adventurous, creative, and open-minded. My favorite interview question in this category is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how lucky are you in life? And 1 is, I don't know why bad things always seem to happen to me. 10 is, I don't know why good things always seem to happen to me. Well, we don't want to hire the ones because they're bad luck. We don't want bad luck to find its way to Zappos. But this was actually inspired by a research study that I'd read about, where they actually asked that exact same question to a whole group of random people. So they got all sorts of different answers, and then afterwards they had them do a task. And the task was to go through a newspaper and count the number of photos that were in that newspaper. But what the participants didn't know was that it was actually a fake newspaper. And sprinkled throughout the newspaper were these headlines that would say things like, if you're reading this now, you can stop, the answer's 37, and collect an extra $100. And what they found was that the people that considered themselves unlucky in life generally never noticed the headlines. They diligently went through their assigned task and eventually came up with the right answer, whereas the people that consider themselves lucky in life generally stopped early and made that extra $100. So the takeaway is that it's not so much that people are inherently lucky or unlucky in life, but luck is really more about being open to opportunity beyond just how the task or situation presents itself. So that's why we asked that question for core value #4. One of our other core values, #6, is all about transparency. And we really try to be as transparent as possible, whether it's to our customers or our employees or to our vendor partners. So for example, our vendor partners can log into our extranet system and view the exact same information our own buyers and merchandisers view, including on-hand inventory, sales, profitability, markdowns, and so on. We have a quarterly all-hands meetings where employees can ask whatever questions they want, whether it's about financials or what brands we're going to carry and so on. And then we actually live stream that to the public. So any of you can actually tune into our all-hands meetings to see what that's like. And when reporters come and visit our offices, we'll give them a tour. And then we tell them, walk around, talk to whoever you feel like, and then come find me when you're done. And the reason we do that, we actually don't have PR training or media training and so on, is because we know we've hired values match the corporate values, and we know employees understand the long-term vision of the company. So every employee is just automatically living the brand. And so reporter talks to 10 random people. They may not have the exact same sound bites and so on, but what the reporter will find is consistency in their attitude, and more importantly, authenticity in their interactions. So that's why we allow reporters or anyone else to just walk around and talk to anyone. And so one of the reactions we'll get sometimes is, especially when you see our offices, it's not your typical corporate offices, there's decorations all over the place and so on, is that, okay, happy for you, Zappos, you made the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list 3 years in a row, but the stuff you're talking about would never work at my company. And what I found really interesting from the research from those 2 books, Good to Great and Tribal Leadership, was that they found it actually doesn't matter what your values are. What matters is that you have them and you align the entire organization around them and you commit to them. And by committing to them, meaning you're willing to hire or fire based on them independent of their actual job performance. So I'm not out here in the book. The purpose of the book is not to help spread the Zappos culture or our values to other companies, because in a lot of cases, or most cases, that would probably be the wrong decision. But the message is actually figure out values that you can commit to and align the organization around. So one of the other reactions we get sometimes, and I'll make this presentation available, is, oh, maybe this only works for internet companies or technology companies. And so we actually have a separate website and entity called Zappos Insights. If you go to zapposinsights.com, there's anything from a monthly video subscription service to you can sign up for these 1-day and 2-day seminars where companies from all over the world fly in and we help them figure out their values. And so one of the stories in there that I thought was really cool is about the Atlanta Refrigeration Company. They're based in Atlanta, Georgia, and they do refrigeration repairs out in the field. So in some ways, you can't think of a more opposite company or industry than Zappos. And they went through, and then a few months later, after focusing on making customers happier and making employees happier, and it was really neat. They even sent us before and after pictures of their offices and really focused on company culture. They reported back that not only is everyone happier, but their revenues and profits are up in a down economy doing refrigeration repairs. So for us, it's just been really exciting to see this whole concept of happiness as a business model spread to other companies and organizations and industries. So going back to the research from Good to Great and Tribal Leadership, I said the authors researched and found that there were 2 ingredients that separated the great companies in terms of long-term financial performance from just the good ones or mediocre ones. The first one is that they all had strong cultures. The second one I actually found really counterintuitive. The second ingredient they found was that the great companies all had a vision that had a higher purpose beyond just money or profits or being number one in the market. And the weird thing about that, and ironic thing about that, is that by actually having a higher purpose, that's what enabled these companies to actually generate more profits than their peers and competitors. So sometimes at entrepreneur conferences, people will approach me and ask me, what's a good market to go into where I can make a lot of money? And my advice to them is, rather than have money be your primary motivator, think about what would you be so passionate about doing that you'd be happy doing it for 10 years, even if you never made any money from it, and that's what you should be doing. And if you do that, it will actually greatly increase your chances of making more money, because your passion is what's going to get you through the tough times, and every business has its ups and downs, and your passion is going to rub off onto employees and customers and your business partners and so on. So I like to say chase the vision, not the money. There was a movie that came out several years ago called Notorious. Did anyone in this room see this very important movie? No. This is actually, I think, the best response I've ever seen, because normally one person raises their hand. I thought I was the only person that saw this movie because I think it only lasted a week in the theater. But in this movie, Puff Daddy says to rapper Biggie Smalls, also known as Notorious B.I.G., "Don't chase the paper, chase the dream." I just wanted an excuse to use this picture in a business presentation. So if you're an entrepreneur, think about what would you be so passionate about doing that you'd be happy doing it for 10 years, even if you never made any money from it. And that's what you should be doing. And if you have employees that report to you, think about what is the larger vision or greater purpose in the work beyond just money or profits or being number one in the market or beating the competition. There's a lot of books and consultants that talk about how to motivate employees. And kind of some of the traditional techniques for motivating employees are incentives, for example. If you do X, then I'll give you Y. And if you do more of X, then I'll give you more of Y. Or recognition is another way to motivate employees. But what we accidentally stumbled into and learned through the years at Zappos is that there's a huge, huge difference between motivation and inspiration. And if you can inspire your employees through a vision that has a higher purpose, beyond just money or profits or being number one in a market, and if you can inspire your employees by having values, not just stated values, but actually practice values that match their own personal values, then you can accomplish so much more, and you don't really need to worry about the motivation part of it. We found that just kind of takes care of itself. So this is kind of the evolution of our brand when you can just see how we started out just thinking, oh, let's be the market leader. And then that evolved into customer service and really focusing on culture and different types of customer service, really focusing on the high-touch type of customer service instead of just the high-tech. And then a couple years ago, we decided, actually, let's just simplify the vision because customer service is all just about making customers happy. Company culture is about making employees happy. If we just simplify the vision into just being about delivering happiness, what will happen? And then the funny thing about simplifying the vision is it actually opened up more business opportunities for us, like Zappos Insights, which is now about helping other companies make their customers and employees happy, and is its own fast-growing division. And in fact, that's actually growing faster than the rest of Zappos. So wanted to, actually, I got to skip over a couple slides, but take a step back and actually ask all of you to participate in this one question. And think about it for yourself personally. What is your goal in life? And really think about it for yourself, because sometimes when I meet new people, I like to ask this question because it's really interesting on the kind of variety of responses that I get back. And so for some people, they might say, well, my goal is to grow a company. And then some people might say, oh, it's to be healthy. And then I'll ask them why. And so whatever answer you came up with for your own personal goal in life, ask yourself why. And then I'll get another set of answers like retire early or so I can run faster. And then I'll ask why again. So whatever answer you came up with for yourself, ask why again. And then people say, oh, so I can spend more time with family, or so I can run a marathon. But what I find really interesting is if you ask yourself why over and over and over again, almost everyone winds up with the same answer eventually. Like whatever your goal in life is, usually the reason people are pursuing it is because they believe that ultimately it'll make them happier. So a few years ago, having nothing at all to do with Zappos, this was just kind of a side hobby I was doing on weekends, I started reading all these books and articles about the science of happiness. And what's interesting is actually this field of research is relatively new. It didn't exist prior to 1998. Prior to 1998, most of psychology was about looking at people that had something wrong with them and trying to figure out how to make them more normal. Right? But almost nobody bothered to study how to take normal people and make them happier. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And as I started reading more and more of the research that's been done, one of the consistent findings in the research is that people are actually very bad at predicting what will make them happy on a long-term sustainable basis. Most people think, oh, once I achieve this or once I get this, then I'll be happy. When the research actually shows that's not true. Like look at lottery winners, for example. Their happiness right before winning the lottery and their happiness level a year later. And a year later, it's the same or maybe even a little bit lower than what it was before. So I started thinking, well, at Zappos, if we're trying to make customers happy and trying to make employees happy, it's actually not as simple as just asking them, what can we do better? How can we make you happier? Because the research shows they don't actually know. And there's a lot of science behind some of the stuff we do at Zappos in terms of website conversion, repeat customer metrics, and customer acquisition, and so on. And so if our goal is to make customers and employees happy, what if some % of the time was actually spent just reading up on the research that's been done on the science of happiness? And I was thinking, how could that help not only myself personally, but actually help the business? And so many people go through their entire lives kind of putting off that happiness at the end, thinking, okay, one day I'm going to do this thing that I actually care about or that I'm passionate about. And sadly, for many people, that day never comes because it's always, oh, I'm going to do that one day. And then of the people that do get there, a lot of them find is actually the happiness they got to is actually much shorter lasting than they kind of had envisioned in their minds their entire lifetime. So what if by reading up on the science of happiness, you can actually get to the happiness much more efficiently and faster? So I just want to share a few different frameworks of happiness that I thought were really interesting to me from the research that's been found. So first framework is that happiness is really just about 4 things: perceived control, perceived progress, connectedness, meaning the number and depth of your relationships, and being part of something bigger than yourself that has meaning to you. And what I think is really interesting is you can actually apply this not only to your own life, but to business as well. So for example, at Zappos, for perceived progress, in our merchandising department, we used to hire people at entry level, and then they get trained, certified, and so on, and then 18 months after that, they'd get a promotion. And then they'd get additional training and certification, and then get another promotion 18 months after that, and become a buyer, which at Zappos is a pretty big thing. So total time to go from entry level to buyer was 3 years. Well, we changed that a few years ago so that instead of a promotion every 18 months, we gave them smaller promotions every 6 months. They still had to go through the exact same training and mentorship and certification, and it still took them exactly 3 years to become a buyer, but we found employees were suddenly a lot happier because there was that ongoing sense of perceived progress. And it cost the company nothing to implement that. Another framework is Maslow's hierarchy. There's a great book called Peak, P-A-K, by Chip Conley. And he actually takes these Maslow's and condenses it down to 3 levels and applies it to customers, employees, and investors. So for example, the 3 levels in terms of how employees think of their work are, do they think of their work as a job, career, or calling? And our whole goal is to move employees up that pyramid, and we still want them to be Zappos employees 10 years from now. And the only way that anyone's going to be an employee for that long is if they feel like they're continuing to grow both personally and professionally. So that's why we invest so much in the training and mentorship of our employees. And then finally, I wanted to share the 3 types of happiness: pleasure, engagement, and meaning. The first type I like to call the rock star type of happiness because it's all about chasing the next high. As it turns out, it's great if you can sustain it. The problem is it's really hard to sustain unless you're basically a rock star. And what the research has shown is that as soon as the source of stimuli goes away that's giving you that high, as soon as that goes away, your happiness level just plummets instantly and goes back to wherever it was before. So out of these 3 types, it's actually the shortest lasting type of happiness. The second type is called flow, and there's a book by the same name, and we've all experienced this. It's about those moments in time when you're so into whatever you're doing. For some people, it might be painting. For other people, it might be running. That time just flies. 3 hours pass, and it seems like it's only been 20 minutes. Other characteristics associated with it are you lose a sense of self-consciousness or even self, and professional athletes refer to it as being in the zone. And kind of the strategy there is notice when it happens, because it happens to all of us, just different things trigger it. And then think about maybe you should change your job or your environment or who you hang out with or where you live to have those occurrences of flow happen more frequently. And out of these 3 types, it's actually the second longest lasting type of happiness. And the last type is about being part of something bigger than yourself that has meanings to you. So for some people, that might mean volunteering for their favorite charity, for example. And out of these 3 types, it's actually the longest lasting type of happiness. And what I find interesting is most people go through life chasing after the first type, thinking if once I could sustain that, which as it turns out is next to impossible, then I'll worry about the second type, and then if I ever get around to it, I'll think about the third type one day. Whereas the proper strategy based on this research data is actually you should figure out the third type of happiness first, and then layer on top of that the second type. And anytime you experience the first, that's just kind of icing on the cake. So these are some books that I would recommend. Anyone that wants a copy of this presentation, just send me an email, tony@deliveringhappiness.com. Oh, also that culture book that I talked about earlier, it's a physical book, so you need your physical mailing address. We also have a website set up for tours. You can just go to tours.zappos.com next time you're coming to Vegas and come for a tour. It's pretty fun. So just want to end with, the title of my book is Delivering Happiness. The subtitle is A Path to Profits, Passion, and Purpose. And the reason why I chose that to be the subtitle is because the research has shown you actually need all 3 of those to build a long-term, sustainable, growing business. And I think too many companies focus on just the profits part of it. They either forget about or ignore or don't care about the passion and purpose part of it, and that actually ends up hurting their ability to generate more profits in the long term. And kind of my weird aha moment was when I was reading up on the whole science of happiness research, was that happiness is really about being able to combine pleasure, passion, and purpose. And so for me, that was almost kind of the sign to what kind of nudged me to actually write the book and think, okay, maybe this is the right time to really spread this whole idea of happiness as a business model to other companies and organizations and industries beyond just Zappos. So just want to leave you with thinking about what percent of your time do you want to spend reading up on the science of happiness. How can that help yourself individually and also help your business and your brand? And if the research shows that companies with a higher purpose actually generate more profits in the long term. And if the research shows that individuals with a higher purpose are actually happier, think about what is your company's higher purpose and what is your own higher purpose. And if through this presentation you've been inspired to either focus more on customer service and the customer experience to make customers happier, or you've been inspired to